Okay, so I'm having a whinge about we're not doing much on the Alzheimer's front, and in the previous part you're explaining what is happening. I mean, just to sort of reconnect this, it's a national emergency. I remember David Cameron thinking he cracked Alzheimer's by having the cabinet given an Alzheimer's briefing, and Andy Tyso, who's one of our Academy ambassadors, did the briefing. You know, and you think, no, David, this is much more important. And I don't think it's crippling for families.
Totally,
and it's more a disease for a family than it is for the individual. Really, if you can kind of see it in that context. But we just seem to be letting it all come in, hoping that somebody's going to come up with, we're going to have the Jon Snow moment with the parrot with the pump, and somebody's going to figure out why we all get ill because there's a dirty pump. Students of public health will know what that's all about, and if you don't Google it, Jon Snow public health. But we're not going to get that. And I mean, I think we need, like the Treasury to say, tax breaks for pharmaceutical companies that are investing in this sector. Yeah. We need to say to pharmaceutical companies, we won't license anything unless it's come from all of you working together.
Well, and for example, when I first got involved with Alzheimer's, Wellcome Foundation weren't funding it, which is extraordinary when you think about the challenge. Now they're funding it heavily, as are MRC. So actually the government Wellcome has, and the government are putting a lot more money in, and a lot more private money is going in, and a lot more pharmaceuticals. So in terms of the actual amount of money going into research, there's a whole lot more going in, and it's a lot more strategically being used than it was when it was a little, a research project here, somebody like a research project here. There are questions that we're trying to answer, and so research is commissioned in a very different way.
I hope. I mean, I'm very sceptical about these charities that fund the research, and we don't. I mean, I suppose the charities are only formed because they are tough nuts to crack, but I don't ever feel reassured that actually they are working with white heat to try and crack this stuff.
Actually, what they've been able to do at Alzheimer's Research UK is bring people together. That's one of them. Apart from raising lots of money, they've also been able to bring all of these factors together because they're a third sector organisation, and it's a great thing to be able to do. That government seems to find it harder to do, but having them as a sort of kingpin or the central pin to draw in the other people and raise national awareness about it. It has been very good, actually. I think.
You see these ludicrous headlines in the newspaper, drink 6 cups of coffee today, you never get Alzheimer's.
Do you know, I think the Daily Express seems to have an Alzheimer's thing about twice a week.
Yeah.
It was curry this morning.
Oh, was it curry?
Curry, eat curry. Yeah. I think it's extraordinary. I mean, why don't we just leave it to the Daily Express? You're wasting your time. Just hand the whole lot over to the proprietors of the Daily Express. Yeah, okay, so fine. So you're still doing that. You're the chairman of another outfit. What is it?
I'm chairman of a small think tank, British Future.
Yeah, I had a look at their website. What the hell does that do?
Oh, it's so interesting. So, immigration.
What's it called? British Future?
British Future, yeah. So actually, British Future was set up by a number of foundations.
Cadbury, you have money from Cadbury, is it?
Barry Cadbury, yeah.
Is that the Cadbury Foundation? Cadbury family?
Barry Cadbury, yes. So basically what happened was that a number of foundations in the USA and in the UK had begun to get concerned about the conversations around immigration. And why wouldn't you? Because, of course, some of them have been particularly bad. And so the idea being that a lot of the organisations that the third sector that cared about these issues were giving out the wrong messages, the campaigning around it wasn't quite right, wasn't hitting the right cause. So they wanted to fund an organisation that could actually work with those organisations but also get different messages out about immigration and integration and opportunity. It is not my field. I am not an expert. I chair it, and the board is full of people who are experts at this, or they're lawyers or whatever. I just sort of hold it together. But I'm very proud of the work because to give you one example, they produced loads of great stuff, how to talk about immigration for politicians, to say you're doing it wrong, you shouldn't say it this way. And the reason they can do that is that they've done lots of work with the public. And the best example is that British Future's been doing 60 conversations around the UK about immigration, visiting 60 cities, talking to people, setting up citizen
panels.
And
they're quite tough cities as well.
They're very tough cities.
They're not like Milton Keynes or Guildford, are they?
And you should look at this report, because the Home Office Select Committee are using the work to inform them about their final report that will come out at the end of the year. And so this little organisation who's working with Hope Not Hate, so it's British Future and Hope Not Hate, partly funded by the Joe Cox Foundation, has been going around the country talking to loads of people and to find out what their views are. And the report's so interesting, because what you discover is that actually it's not immigration, it's other stuff that's happening in the town around people coming in.
We
so
saw
infrastructure things.
Well, we saw that during the Brexit thing. If you look who voted in and who voted out, you look at the economic envelope where the people are living and the availability of council housing and all that kind of stuff. It's a very complicated thing.
And so we got under the skin of it a little bit. And Sundar Katwala, who's the CEO, writes very well about all of these things. And so we've had lots of reports recently in the Observer and other, just understanding how people feel and not dissing one side or the other, but just trying to understand it so we can come to a consensus position, and so people can say, what is it we'd really like to see in our immigration system? Right.
Now, I'm mindful of the time. Let's get to the nub of Shirley and her job now. Public health, I mean, let's go from the platform that public health has been a complete bloody disaster. It's achieved almost nothing. We're all fat and drinking too much and watching the telly.
Yeah.
What the hell, why bother?
Oh, that was a sad statement, Roy, and you know this too. But basically, public health in the UK has a lot of different challenges, that's for sure, part of which is systemic. But I'd first like to say how many good things public health has done in the UK. We're considered a world leader in public health.
Okay,
and it's only when I go abroad I hear this.
Well, let's go.
We are world leaders in public health.
Wait, let's think about public health. Right, we've got adult literacy, clean water, childhood immunisation, seatbelts in cars, crash helmets, smoking in the workplace, health and safety. It's all the law. We haven't persuaded anybody to do anything.
Okay, so the law is really important. Discuss the law, and I really think this should be sort of number one, makes a difference. So, for example...
It's the only thing that makes it... Thomas McEwen in 1969 said the governments have done everything they can with public health, adult literacy, clean water, childhood immunisation. The rest is the extent to which government is prepared to interfere in the lives of ordinary citizens.
Okay, well, and that would seem to be almost a political statement.
Yeah, Thomas McEwen, he's your man, isn't he? A big public health guru.
I think there are two things. So from a Royal Society for Public Health point of view, we tend to look, and I think it's the right way to look, at the public's health, not public health. So public health, I know what you're thinking very technically, and all of the stuff that we all know about public health that we do, but our concern is around the public's health.
Which is a much wider thing.
Which is a much broader issue.
That's social stuff.
Well, it's really, really important, because what we know about health inequalities is absolutely massive.
Inequalities are widening.
Yes.
I mean, almost every public health indicator I can think of, not wishing to be rude, or thought of as rude, but every public health indicator I can think of is going in the wrong direction.
Okay, let's take smoking. That's actually
there was the law
quite well.
It was Tony Blair.
The law. We've called for smoking exclusion zones in parks and things. So we think the law really works. But that...
We can't even stop smoking in hospitals.
I think we have.
Really?
Well, I do find, having just come, my husband just having come out, you do find the smokers round the corner of the front doors of the hospital. This is absolutely true. Well, we've got 15% of people smoking, and in the 60s we had 70%.
It's 18%.
Well, it depends how you...
Yes,
we're saying 50,
yeah,
but anyway.
Yeah, it's 18.
So we've done
Just
a
for the
reasonable
record,
job.
18%.
But I agree with you, it's taken too long. It's taken far too long.
Well, it took the law.
It's taken 50 years.
Well, it took a guy
Yeah.
who had the cojones to take on the establishment, wasn't it? You know, everyone said Blair wouldn't do it. He did it. I mean, think what you like about Tony Blair, and he's a kind of Marmite guy, and some people love him, some people hate him, but the legacy I choose for him,
and that's a good one,
is millions of lives have been saved through having the balls to prevent smoking in the workplace.
So
what about sugar then?
Well, you've really hit the point of it though, which is so much of this is political.
Sugar?
Sugar, the sugar tax. George Osborne
brought
that in. Well, the levy is there. 430 million supposedly that's going to provide, and that money, so-called, should be going into physical activity, school playgrounds.
Yeah.
However, in the summer...
we all have a gym membership with Virgin and no one goes. Look, we know...
No, this is about public parks, and this is about...
Who's got
stuff
time to
for
go
schools.
to a park? I mean,
but let me get to my point about
middle-class claptrap, surely.
But the political point is that in the summer of 2017, all of a sudden the Department for Education looked and found a big hole in its budget and said, where can we get 300 million for our school budget? And of course they looked at the sugar tax, they looked at the levy. And so what we have to do in public health is be much more disruptive, I think. We needs to have a bigger voice for the public's health.
Let's look at the structure of it. I mean, thanks to Lansley's lunacy, we smashed up public health, ripped it out of the heart of the health of the NHS, shoved it up the back passage of the town hall, and we're wondering why it doesn't work.
So I'll disagree with you on that, because I think that was the one bit of Andrew Lansley's madness, if you like, that actually was probably the smart thing to do. But what they didn't do, of course, was then decide to fund it. They said, we'll put it with local government, and then we'll just treat it like the rest of local government.
What's happened to AIDS and HIV now, how fractured those services are. Now, it's impossible to manage AIDS and HIV policies now, because it straddles local government, the health service, nobody's got any money, there's no coordination of the policy, it's a nightmare.
Well, so
all those sorts, the gum stuff and the sexual health, all of that very important stuff for young people, young families.
I agree.
Certainly AIDS and HIV, big issue. We're stuck with a dysfunctional system that prevents...
This I would agree with. Here we should be talking about health system. And what should a health system do? It should help you be healthy. And then we'd have an illness system for when we're ill. And that's the NHS. And really what we've got is an illness system, not a health system. And a health system would be integrated, it would be place-based, it would understand the social determinants of health. The fact is, if you live in a poor area, your chances, if you're poor, your chances of living as long as somebody in a wealthy area, 12 times in some areas that you're not so... We know all this.
We've
and we
known
don't
it for
act
years.
on it.
Don't live on the west side of the town, live on the east side, it's richer on the east side and all of that. You know, and travel on the tube and you lose a year of your life between Knightsbridge and wherever it is. You know, we know all this, but nobody does anything about it. And if the things we could do things about, like sexual health, like AIDS and HIV, those services really have been broken up to make them unmanageable. And so instead of lobbying like you do to stop people having a chocolate muffin...
I never have lobbied.
I'm sure I have. I've heard you on the Lalas talking about chocolate muffins. I'm sure
I could have been talking about
chocolate muffins. Yeah, it's in the Shirley's Bake Off. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, shouldn't you be campaigning to try and get some cohesion to the things that once worked that don't work now?
Well, I think what we need to do is make progress. And I mean, I think there's an argument that sexual health services could go within the NHS, honestly. I think there's a possibility. But there's loads of issues around the public's health that need to be tackled in a very comprehensive way. Childhood obesity is a really good example. So we wait for the strategy finally comes out, and what do we find? The single most important bit that they needed to include is missing. And that bit was advertising, promotions and sponsorship.
Why do you think that?
Well, I think that, yeah.
Could it be something to do with lobbying and money?
Exactly.
And
so your point about Tony Blair and cigarettes was there needs to be braver politicians making these decisions for the public's health. They really do. I mean, some of this is not complicated. Minimum unit pricing for alcohol. Scotland have just done it after the Whisky Association took them to court for 5 years, but that's gone through. Wales will do it. We'll be left here in Westminster unless somebody, I mean, we should be doing it. It's not rocket science.
It's not
that's
going to happen
simple.
for the
It's
foreseeable,
cheap
surely, is it? Because everybody's preoccupied with Brexit. There won't be any parliamentary time, will there?
Well, that's absolutely right. I mean,
so we're stuck for the next 5 years.
Let's look at the opportunities around that. Well, I don't think they can keep arguing that when the evidence builds up, because I think at some point the population wants to see some movement on other things.
Well, we've got evidence-free policy up till now. I don't think why we need evidence now. What country, in your experience, does public health well? Where do you think is the kind of except? Where are aside from countries who have got an entirely different diet, you know, because they live in a different climate and all the rest of it, you know, where is there? Let's look at Europe. Who's healthy in Europe?
Okay, so I think you can pick off issues actually in Europe, but Scandinavia, you would say, overall, Norway, Finland, Sweden, and the reason is that infrastructure across poverty is better than anywhere else.
It's not that it's cold and miserable there.
Cold and miserable, but people happy.
If you're watching
and
this,
they're in, and you know, their structure, their welfare state, if you like, works properly. You just have to take immunisation.
And they pay for it.
And they pay for it, and they don't mind paying for it.
If you look in Sweden, taxes in Sweden are, for most people, are around 50% of your income.
But they understand the importance of the issue. So if you talk about immunisation in Sweden, they will talk about the fact that there might be a child down the street with leukemia, and so who can't be immunised, and so all the children round that child need to be immunised to protect. The herd immunity stuff is well understood. They have 98% coverage. It's extraordinary. Here, it's about my child. So, you know, we've had all the, you know, problems with the anti-vaxxers, etc. And I think it's all pushing up again now. But what I'm saying is they've got that.
What about you can't take the kid? You can't put your kids in school unless they've been immunised.
I think I would be very pro that. I think we need to have some rules around things like that, because we know that immunisations work. I mean, we'd be sitting here with all sorts of diseases if we, you know, if immunisations didn't work. And we've been massively in favour. Actually, we think HPV for boys, we've been advocating that. So I would say overall, Scandinavia, but if you look at drug policy, and look at Portugal. So Portugal have taken a health harm approach to drugs, and they've got much less drug problem there.
So people know what they're doing in Portugal, they've actually effectively legalised.
Yeah, legalised personal possession, but they've also taken a health approach. So we produced a report called Taking a New Line on Drugs a couple of years ago, and we were all slightly worried about it because we thought, well, this is quite controversial in the sense that we examined all the evidence, we talked to people abroad, all the stakeholders, and we produced a report that came out with, you know, what a health harms policy would look like, i.e. that drug policy should be put together with alcohol, with tobacco, in the same group, and should be with the Department of Health. There's no business being with the Home Office. Now, the police support this, and the many of the police and crime commissioners support this. So we felt, that we were following the tide. It really is a very good report, and we've been following through on that. And so these are the kind of things that would make a big difference here. And we look at somewhere like Portugal, crime's gone down, deaths have gone down, all of the, they've moved the indicators in a really positive way. And we're not treating poor addicts as criminals. We're treating them as people who need to have support with their health. Do you
know, there's obviously a brave political decision. Do you know what public attitudes were like before? Did they have a fight with the public to do this?
No, not particularly. And I think I don't think we would hear. So what happened when our report came out? It got a lot of publicity, but we had for the first time 2 editorials: the Times front page and the Times editorial, saying the time had come to do this. Martin Wolf in the FT did a whole half page on it, saying it was one of the best reports he'd read because it made total sense in policy terms. So for us, it was saying not the usual suspects are talking about drugs policy. So we got it onto the radar of people who decision makers and politicians listen to. And that's an example, I think, of moving things forward. I honestly believe, probably won't be while I'm still around in the role, if you like, but I think this will happen because it makes sense and the evidence is there, but the political will isn't there. So all the commentators, right and left, think this is a good policy. The only people that don't seem to are in the Home Office. So when you've got the police behind you and the police and crime commissioners, you have to.
Well, I suppose
it's about politics.
The politicians think, well, where are the votes going to come from? They'll do, and that means you've got to soften up public opinion, haven't you? Before, so the politicians feel safe. Blair didn't do that with smoking. I'm not sure where the smoking thing actually came from, but he just kind of did it.
Brilliant.
And it wasn't, there wasn't a huge consultation over it, was it? They just did it. And they had the big enough majority in the House of Commons.
To do it. And the evidence was so clear. And there's so much evidence. And that's why evidence on its own is never enough. So anything that we put out and the work that we do has the evidence, but it also has what the public think. We don't put anything out in our reports or our press that doesn't have a big public component, because we've gone and asked people what they think. We've asked the public, what do you think? We make recommendations. We ask them, what do you think about this recommendation? Do you think that would work? And so what we're trying to do is create a dialogue with the public, not the finger wagging nanny state, but let's have a conversation about this. So another good example was last year we did status of mind, hashtag status of mind, social media and young people's mental health. And this is an emerging issue, so there's some evidence, but what we really needed to do was to find out what young people think. So we bothered to ask 2,000 young people what they thought.
And what do they think?
We asked them actually, which was really interesting, we did a league table of the platforms, and we said, of these 14 questions, which how would you rate the platforms in terms of your health and well-being, the positive and the negative? So, it was quite a well-balanced report. And of course, YouTube was the most popular, best for your health and well-being, and Instagram was the least, because the issues that young people are concerned about here is we're concerned about sleep, body image, depression, anxiety, and cyberbullying. So these are on the negative side. On the positive, there's all those communities you can be in touch with, people who might have your condition. Suddenly you can talk to different people. You can create your own friend group, if you like. You can find great information. So that there's a whole host of good things about it. And our point in the report was to say, let's think about how to mitigate the bad stuff, the negative things, make some recommendations, and let's see how we can enhance the good things about social media.
The social media thing is really important. So often you find organisations like yours say, we've got a website and you can look it up on our website. No, try Facebook, You might get somebody to look at it.
Yeah.
It's a whole different thing. If you could change one thing, what would you change?
Oh goodness.
One big public health thing. What would it be?
That's really.
It's tough, isn't it?
It's actually about politicians being willing to engage in this area, because I mean.
What about, supposing we took the politicians out of it and said, if you did crowdsourcing style approaches to questions, you know, so if you said to people, for example, you know, should we have a chocolate muffin tax or something, you know.
We do know that tax works and financial incentives work.
Do you think so?
Well, the evidence shows that they do, so that's why we want, you know, that's why minimum unit pricing.
Does the evidence really show? I mean, does it not just disadvantage people on low incomes anyway?
Well, the MUP is about the horrible white cider, and I mean that's the bit of the market that actually really needs to be got rid of, and is, you know, you can get these drums of cheap cider for £3 or something. This is, and guess what? Every place that sells it is always round the corner from a bail hostel or somewhere. You know, that's what you want to get rid of.
It's the interconnectedness of our lives, isn't it? That I'll come back to your thing.
Yeah, no,
but I mean, it's the interconnectedness of our lives that is the sum total of the public's health.
So what I'd really like to see...
So is it too difficult?
Yes. No. I think what we really need to do is look at it the other way around. I mean, I'm a huge fan of the NHS, having had my husband just in hospital for 8 days with his broken femur.
You pushed him under a lorry, didn't you? What did you do? What's happened? He's fallen
off his bike.
Is the bicycle damaged?
Well,
because they're very expensive.
His second best bicycle didn't have that much damage. It was only to his leg that it got really.
God,
Thank
right.
God, that's what he said.
God, the bike's all right.
Yeah.